House Democrats' Chief Deputy Whip, Dan Kildee. Congressman, good to have you back.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me back on.
The message, I know you were espousing this not too long ago. Everything okay?
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right.
Yep, I lost the feed for a sec.
Okay, but you're concerned, I guess President Obama was concerned about, don't take the passion away from some of these candidates and they bring it to the race, but do remind Americans how you're going to pay for a lot of that. Do you think a lot of them are going too far?
Well, I don't think it goes too far to have big, bold ideas and set goals that sometimes seem beyond our reach. I actually think that kind of enthusiasm is something that the country needs, and we ought to accept it. But I do think the president makes a very important point. We actually have to get things done. Politics is the art of the possible, and I think very often we confuse big goals with the idea that somehow we have to pass those great big bold ideas all at once and we're never going to have a chance to debate a sort of incremental approach to solving big problems. So I accept, the ideas that these new members are bringing. I think it's a lot of enthusiasm, but I do think we have to make sure that when we go back home, we're actually delivering. We're doing something for the people that we care about.
Now, there are many of your colleagues who want the focus to be on those economic issues like health care. I guess it was a gift, according to some of your colleagues, for the president to even raise that issue in the middle of the Mueller report findings. Do you think that the fact that the Attorney General is going to bring this report, as much as he can, all 400-plus pages of it, out in 2 weeks, will resolve the issue, or will it complicate it?
Well, it depends on what it says in the report. Obviously, the Attorney General provided his interpretation, and obviously his point of view is very important. He's the one who ultimately makes decisions about whether the Justice Department pursues charges against individuals. But I think there's two standards here. One is whether a criminal standard has been met. But I think the American people have the right to know more than just that. They have a right to know all the information that's included in the report. And they may make judgments about the president and the people around him and his behavior that could fall short of criminal activity, but raise very serious questions about the president's involvement. And I think it's important to keep that distinction in mind.
Do you believe Nancy Pelosi called a lot of the characterizations on the part of the Attorney General about the Mueller report condescending? But I cannot imagine, Congressman, that if any of those points were wrong, that Mueller or his team wouldn't have spoken out.
Yeah, I don't know if I would use the term condescending. I understand that it may be considered condescending that we should accept only his interpretation and not be able to come to our own judgments about the activity. And again, the thing I've been focusing on even long before the Attorney General delivered his letter and the report was received is that we all should withhold our own judgments until we have a chance to actually read the information in the report. I understand the decision the Attorney General's made. That's the decision. But I think we can all benefit from knowing more about what the facts are underlying that decision. And again, we have to make our own judgments about the president and those around him based on those facts. Personally, I think some of the president's behavior has been pretty troubling. That doesn't mean that it rises to the level of criminal activity, but it's important that the people know.
Are you troubled that Andrew Schiff is still of a mindset that it was?
Pardon me?
Are you still concerned that Andrew Schiff thinks that it was, that Adam Schiff, I apologize, thinks it was criminal?
Yeah, I think in the case of Adam's perspective, look, I think he can speak for himself, obviously, and the fact that he's troubled by a lot of the information and sees it as problematic doesn't necessarily mean that it rises to the level of criminal activity. So people can talk about the term collusion without coming to the conclusion that there's ample evidence to charge somebody criminally for that behavior. And I think some of the criticism that Adam is receiving right now is sort of conflating the notion that he may have come to some conclusions about whether there was, quote, collusion. That doesn't necessarily mean that it rises to a standard that would require him to be, the president to be charged with a crime. And I think, honestly, some of the vitriol around Adam's leadership just strikes me as being very political.
Political or not, I do want to move on to the latest allegations against Joe Biden. You might have heard that this woman, Lucy Flores, was running for lieutenant governor in Nevada, has claimed that the vice president at the time inappropriately touched her, made her feel very uncomfortable. Now, to be clear, the vice president's folks are denying that this was never raised with them at the time. Nevertheless, they're happy and welcome her speaking out. But others have said that this is a pattern, and if it is, there are already those in the Me Too movement who think he shouldn't run for president. What do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously we have to take any of these situations seriously, and we have to take people at their word. If this particular individual was made to feel uncomfortable, then obviously that's something that we have to take seriously. I don't know that there's a pattern. I actually haven't had a chance to read the reports of this particular subject, but this is an important issue in this country, and I think it's long past time that we've taken more seriously the ways that sometimes people are made to feel uncomfortable. I don't know about the particular situation regarding Mr. Biden. Obviously, there have been pretty serious allegations made against the president himself. Those have to be taken seriously as well. But, hopefully, this is something that we can learn more about and make judgments accordingly.
But do you worry, Congressman, and I don't mean to blindside you on this, sir, but do you worry that this, in the context this week of the vice president, former vice president, sort of publicly apologizing for his treatment of Anita Hill during the Clarence Thomas hearings, that he's losing women, that they're not sympathetic to his explanations, or maybe incidents like these?
Well, I don't know, and I guess, far be it from me to speak for the women of America. I think they'll have to formulate their own judgments. I do know that the vice president, has been a strong supporter of law to protect women against violence. He has a track record of public policy that I think obviously has to be measured in the full context. But we can't ignore these individual cases. We have to take them seriously and make some judgments based on the facts as they come out.
All right. Congressman, I hope your cell phone is okay. If you dropped it, that it's okay.
All right.
Let me know, all right? Well, very good seeing you again, sir. I appreciate it.
Today, the University of Michigan came out with their sentiment read. It came in much better than Wall Street expected. And there were two parts of this I want to ask you because you know the economy as well as anyone. They said that the bottom two-thirds of income distribution saw a massive gain of 7 points. Just know that that's huge. But there's another line in this report. The last time a larger portion of households reported income gains was in 1966. In other words, Herman, we're seeing shared prosperity like we may not have seen in the last 50 years. The media will never report that.
They won't report it, and that sentiment index alone and what the respondents said debunks the notion and the lie and the narrative that some of the Democrats keep saying is that the president's tax cuts, the president's regulatory rollback, and all of the other things that this president is doing, they keep saying, but it's not helping the average working Americans. That sentiment index disproves that they are also lying about that, just like they lied about the Russian collusion.
Before I let you go, I've got to ask you, is it wise now for President Trump to dive into Obamacare? Because he's going to have to articulate an alternative that people understand.
I think it's wise, and here's why. The president's hands were tied for some of the things that he couldn't unravel in Obamacare because the Democrats forced a law down our throats. So there are certain things that he can achieve with executive order, like an executive order that says that you can have plans across state lines, or eliminating the mandate. That was a good thing. That allowed multiple carriers to come into a market, which helps to lower prices. But there are certain things legally that he cannot do. So he's already done a number of things that are moving in the right direction.
Right.
He needs the help of Congress to take those last final blows to get rid of this system that blew up the House with a leak in the roof. We didn't need to blow up the House with a leak in the roof. And now this president and the Republicans, they now have to rebuild the House and fix the leak, and they're well on their way to do it.
President Trump is stepping up pressure on Republicans for an Obamacare replacement after proposing to present a far better plan. The president reportedly speaking by phone with a handful of senators yesterday, urging them to write a new law. But Democrats are seizing on the president's move, with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer vowing to force a vote to get Republicans on the record. I want to bring in Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. He has been leading the effort in the courts to end the Affordable Care Act. It's great to see you today. What do you think about this move from the president, getting new legislation to replace Obamacare?
I think it's a great idea. I think Obamacare is clearly unconstitutional. Congress does not have the authority to make anybody buy a house, a car, a stick of gum, let alone health insurance. I applaud the president for pushing forward on trying to do something about our health care issues.
Attorney General Paxton, do you have faith actually that Congress can get this done? And look, I say that because for years, Republicans and Democrats have been promising that they were going to do something better than what we have.
Certainly you raise a good point. I certainly hope that they would. But look, I also think the state should have the opportunity to do something about this. Every state might approach this a different way. Texas would approach this different than Massachusetts, and I don't think that's such a bad idea. Allowing the states to experiment and then provide health care coverage the best way that they see fit for their people.
You know, you were so early in the process of trying to alleviate the mandate from Obamacare and other tenets of it. What would you like to see in its place in terms of your state, and why did you fight so hard and so early?
Well, I fought hard because it was clearly unconstitutional. I don't think Congress should be able to force people to buy things. It's just not, it's not right. But I do think we had a solution in Texas before Obamacare came into place, and I think a lot of other states did too. We had a risk pool that people could be part of, and I think if they allowed the states to take advantage of this, I think we would provide options that actually work.
And right now, with the constitutionality being challenged and the DOJ, suing for an upholding of a ruling thereof, what do you think is the timetable? Because Democrats are pushing back, saying that north of 21 million people could lose their current health insurance if there's not an immediate replacement. Yeah,
I don't think that's going to happen. Right now, there's a stay in place. It's already been declared unconstitutional by a federal court. It's going to take a while. It could be a year, year and a half. I don't know. It depends on the courts and how quickly the Fifth Circuit takes it and then the Supreme Court. But the idea that Americans are not going to have health care coverage is just false.
Well, it's interesting because you're the only person that I've heard talk about the gap. So there is time between a decision and what the replacement would need to be put into place. Thank you for that. Meanwhile, President Trump again threatening to close the southern border, as the Wall Street Journal now is reporting that overcrowding is forcing U.S. Border Patrol to stop filing some criminal charges against first-time illegal border crossers along one busy stretch of the border in the West Texas area. Instead, migrant adults traveling without children will be quickly deported without charges. Is that a good idea? Why is that happening?
Look, I think the president's being forced into this. We just don't have room to detain the massive number of people that are coming to the border. And this is part of why he's declared it a crisis. There's just no more resources
available. Well, he called it an emergency. Everybody agrees it's a crisis.
Yeah. Hey, I agree. Emergency, crisis, whatever you want to call it. The problem exists. We're running out of room to house these people, and so I don't think he has a choice. He has to send them away because there's nowhere to put them.
So how do you enforce this? And is this a forgiveness program, too, for people who've crossed over just once who are already in the country? What could enforcing this look like?
Look, this is, I think, somewhat complicated. It's unfortunate that we're in this position, and it speaks to why we need a wall. It speaks to why we need more Border Patrol agents. It speaks to why we need more advanced technology on the border. We just can't deal with the numbers of people coming into our country.
I want to ask you one quick question before I have to let you go.
Sure.
Does the determination as an emergency, as it would like with a hurricane or anything else, allow the president, especially in an instance like this where we could see as many as 1 million people come across our border illegally by the end of the year? That's what experts are telling us. Does that declaration allow the president any more latitude than we've already seen?
Well, look, sure. The definition of an emergency, there is no definition. So Congress, in their passage of this statute, left a wide open door for presidents to decide what they thought an emergency was. There's no definition, and so, yeah, I think the president, they're certainly lean towards accepting what the president does because there's no definition.
All right. Attorney General of the great state of Texas, Ken Paxton, thank you for being with me today.